Some people appear as though they are an open book. Their smiles are warm, their gestures are familiar, and their words sound gentle. Yet somewhere inside you feel a hesitation, a small warning that something is not in alignment. There is a tension hidden beneath the surface, a sense that what is being shown to you is only a fraction of who they are. It is not that they are malicious or deliberately deceiving you. Rather, there is a veil, a barrier that separates what they present from what is truly within. No matter how much time you spend with them, there remains a distance that words cannot close. Friedrich Nietzsche believed that this mystery was not an exception, but the rule of human existence. He understood the human being as a creature of masks, layers carefully placed over one another. These masks are not simply tricks to manipulate others. They are survival mechanisms, born from the way we are shaped since childhood. From an early age, we are told to trust what people say, to take language at face value. Yet language itself is fragile. Nietzsche saw words not as a direct bridge to truth, but as disguises that often cover what cannot be safely revealed. Consider those who constantly speak of kindness. They may not be paragons of virtue, but instead individuals terrified of rejection. Think about the people who emphasize their strength with every word and posture. Often, they are standing on the edge of collapse, desperately holding their balance. The one who loudly insists on their convictions may be trying to drown out the sound of their own doubt. Nothing is ever quite what it appears to be. This is not cynicism but clarity, because once you realize the limits of language, the contradictions around you begin to make sense. When we try to understand people only through their words, we miss reality as it flows quietly past us. The truth does not sit on the surface of speech. It hides in pauses, in subtle gestures, and in the silence between sentences. This is the true code of human communication, and once you begin to read what is not said, the world never looks the same again. Nietzsche once wrote that every profound spirit needs a mask. He did not mean this as an insult. It was a warning. What you are shown in exaggerated friendliness, polished calmness, or calculated confidence is often nothing more than armor. That armor was forged long before you arrived in their lives. It is protection shaped by old wounds, by lessons learned in childhood, by fears that never left. When you look only at the surface, what you are really seeing is not who they are, but who they believe they must be in order to be accepted. Many of the relationships you have built may be with such reflections. You might believe you know someone, only to realize you are attached to a version of them that never truly existed. This is not a judgment placed upon others alone. The question turns inward as well. How many times have you yourself hidden behind the smile you were taught to give, or spoken in the voice you learned was more acceptable? It does not mean you are false. It means you are human. Everyone hides. Everyone carries wounds. To wear a mask is not to live a lie, but to protect a tender place that once felt exposed to harm. Nietzsche did not want you to become paranoid. His aim was lucidity. The task is not to obsess over every gesture, but to recognize the presence of masks. Only then can you begin the deeper search for what lies beneath. When you start to pay attention, something shifts. You no longer listen in the same way. You no longer take words as final proof. You begin to observe the trembling smile, the too perfect answer, the eyes that shift away when the subject grows heavy. Each of these moments is a clue, a small fracture in the surface. The world is not inviting you to accuse or expose. It is inviting you to see more clearly, to perceive the humanity that hides behind the costume. The question is not whether people wear masks. The real question is, are you prepared to see what slips through the cracks? At some point, you have likely witnessed the mask begin to fail. A person insists that they are fine, yet their smile trembles a moment too long. Another laughs off a question, but the sound of that laughter does not match the expression in their eyes. A friend suddenly grows silent when a particular name is spoken. These are not accidents. They are small ruptures in the performance, cracks where the hidden truth seeps out. If you know how to observe, those brief moments reveal more than any direct confession ever could. Nietzsche believed that human beings are not unified, consistent selves. Instead, we are fragile constructions, patchworks of roles and defenses that we build in order to survive a world that feels dangerous. The mask is never perfect. Eventually, it slips. And when it does, we encounter glimpses of the real person beneath. These glimpses may not be dramatic. They may come in the form of a pause before a forced answer, a compliment that feels rehearsed, or a sudden change in tone when the conversation enters vulnerable territory. Each is a signal, a faint echo of something deeper. Often, what is revealed beneath these masks is not malice or cruelty, but fear, shame, or unresolved pain. Think of someone who always mocks displays of emotion. At first, you might label them cold or cynical. But what if their mockery is not a rejection of others, but a defense against their own vulnerability? Perhaps as a child, they were punished for expressing feelings, and now the safest response is to ridicule in order to avoid revisiting that old wound. Their harsh judgment becomes a mirror, reflecting not hatred of others, but rejection of what they have buried within themselves. Nietzsche described this dynamic as projection. We see in others what we cannot accept in ourselves. The jealous individual perceives arrogance everywhere. The insecure one accuses others of being false. The dishonest person calls everyone else a liar. What appears to be judgment is often an unconscious form of self-protection. When we begin to understand this, our perspective shifts. We stop seeing behavior as random quirks and begin to read it as a coded language of inner struggles. These signals are not always obvious. A person may avoid eye contact not because they are rude, but because facing another too directly feels threatening. Someone may laugh when describing their own trauma, not because it is funny, but because laughter makes it easier to carry the weight. Another may change the subject quickly whenever the conversation cuts too close to the bone. These are emotional alarms, ways of preserving themselves against exposure. If you ignore them, you remain disconnected. But if you notice them, you start to see the hidden layers of human life. Learning to observe in this way is not about becoming a manipulator or mind reader. Nietzsche did not encourage exposure for the sake of control. His purpose was to remove illusions, to stop us from being misled by appearances. By recognizing the mask, you do not gain dominance. You gain the possibility of deeper connection. You see others not as they pretend to be, but as they are, trembling, wounded, and searching for safety. You have probably felt this before. In a fleeting pause, a breath that seemed heavier than it should have been, or a silence that stretched too long, you saw someone's true self shine through. For that instant, they were unguarded. They were not the polished version they wanted you to admire. They were simply human. These moments can feel uncomfortable, but they are also precious. They remind us that beneath all defenses, there is always a vulnerable core longing to be seen. Once you learn to recognize these cracks in the mask, the world changes. You stop expecting people to provide neat explanations. You begin listening not only to words, but to everything that surrounds them. Awkwardness, avoidance, detachment, these are not meaningless. They are signals, messages wrapped in silence. And when you recognize them, you are invited to look beyond the performance, to discover the fragile truth that no mask can hide forever. Some individuals seem impossible to shake. They walk into a room with certainty, speak with authority, and correct others without hesitation. From the outside, this appears admirable. Their confidence radiates like armor, making them seem untouchable. Yet Nietzsche asked us to look closer. What if that strength is not strength at all, but a fragile construction? What if the louder the performance, the more delicate the soul behind it? True confidence does not require an audience. It does not demand applause. It does not tremble in silence. and one who constantly boasts about achievements, who dominates conversations, who cannot leave a remark unanswered. Such behavior is not usually a sign of stability, but of struggle. Nietzsche understood that the ego does not reveal itself in stillness. It reveals itself in noise, in exaggeration, in the restless attempt to convince others of what it cannot fully believe itself. Think about the individual who insists on perfection, who cannot rest, who clings to control with every fiber of their being. At first it might look like ambition, like drive, like admirable discipline. But behind that obsession often lies fear, the fear that if control slips for even a moment, the carefully built image will collapse. Control is transformed into survival. The stricter the routine, the more fragile the inner world. Excess is rarely random. It is a desperate attempt to drown out inner chaos with outer performance. This is not meant as condemnation. Nietzsche did not mock these patterns. He illuminated them. He saw that human beings often live not as they truly are, but as they hope others will perceive them. They wear happiness like a costume, even while breaking apart inside. They lecture about morality not out of purity, but to hide unacknowledged guilt. They chase success not always for fulfillment, but to silence the voice that once whispered they were not enough. The culture around us rewards these performances. It celebrates image more than essence, sound more than substance. The loudest and most polished voices are praised, while quiet authenticity often goes unnoticed. In such a world, the temptation to perform becomes overwhelming. Yet Nietzsche urged us to ask, what is being concealed behind the spectacle? What is the wound that drives the need for perfection, applause, or control? Every exaggerated display is not simply behavior. It is a symptom of a deeper battle. And this battle is not limited to others. Each of us knows the feeling of overcompensating when we feel small, of pretending to know when we are filled with uncertainty, of performing confidence when all we want is reassurance. These habits are not flaws in the sense of moral failure. They are survival tactics. They are the ways we protect ourselves from exposure. But in protecting ourselves, we also distance ourselves from truth. The peace that most people long for cannot be performed. It cannot be reached by polishing the mask or rehearsing the lines more perfectly. It comes only when the mask is set aside, even briefly, and the fragile humanity beneath is allowed to breathe. Nietzsche knew that the most intimidating armor often hides the softest heart. The individual who appears the most unshakable may in fact be the one holding themselves together with the last of their strength. The question then becomes personal. How often do you wear such armor? How often do you present certainty when inside you feel confusion? To understand others is to understand yourself. The masks you observe in the world are mirrors of the masks you wear. And once you begin to see this, you can no longer pretend that strength and performance are the same as peace and truth. The roots of these masks stretch back to childhood. Nietzsche believed that the roles we play as adults are not chosen freely, but shaped by the wounds we carried when we were too young to understand them. A person who is silenced as a child often grows into an adult who does not know how to listen, not because of selfishness, but because they are still fighting to have a voice. What we call personality is frequently a set of strategies developed in the earliest years, strategies that once ensured survival, but later become invisible prisons. Studies in behavioral psychology suggest that most of our adult reactions are rooted in experiences before the age of 7. That means the majority of our so-called personality is actually emotional memory. We do not only respond to the present moment, we react to the echoes of the past. A critical word from a colleague may not hurt because of its content, but because it awakens the memory of a parent's disapproval. An argument with a partner may sting not only because of the words spoken, but because it repeats the same pattern of rejection once felt as a child. Look at the achiever who never stops working. Beneath the surface, there is often a child who had to earn affection through accomplishments. Consider the individual who prides themselves on cold logic and mocks emotion. Behind that mask may stand a child who is punished for crying. The loudest voice in the room may belong to someone who was once ignored, who learned that the only way to be noticed was to shout louder than everyone else. These roles begin so early that they feel natural, but in truth, they are learned defenses. A tragedy is that most people are not aware of this repetition. They believe they are freely choosing jobs, partners, or reactions. In reality, they are reenacting old scripts. Someone who avoids intimacy may tell themselves it is independence, but deeper down, it is the memory of closeness always followed by pain. Someone who clings to control may claim it is discipline, when in truth, it is the echo of chaos that once left them vulnerable. The familiar feels safer than the unknown, even when the familiar causes suffering. Nietzsche wanted us to break free from these unconscious patterns. He did not believe identity was fixed, but that it was possible to awaken from the roles imposed by childhood. To see the mask clearly is to realize you are still performing a part written long ago. Awareness creates the possibility of change. You can choose to stop repeating survival scripts and begin writing a new one grounded not in fear, but in clarity and freedom. This awakening begins with small recognitions. Notice the moments when your reaction is stronger than the situation demands. Ask yourself what memory this might be echoing. Pay attention to the roles you feel forced to play: the pleaser, the controller, the performer. These are not who you are. They are patterns. And once you see them as patterns, you are no longer the prisoner. Yet breaking free is not simple. These patterns are not only emotional, they are embodied. The body remembers what the mind forgets. It remembers through tension, through restlessness, through habits that seem automatic. Every repeated reaction is carrying a message. It is not only a defense mechanism, it is also a clue, pointing back to an original wound that still longs for recognition. To ignore it is to remain trapped. To notice it is to begin the process of liberation. The question Nietzsche placed before us is not whether we wear masks, but whether we can bear to remove them. Can you look beyond the patterns, beyond the rehearsed roles, and see the raw truth of where they began? Because until you do, the past continues to write your present. Awareness is the first step toward freedom, and freedom begins with honesty about the scars you carry. When people cannot speak their truth directly, they confess it through patterns of behavior. Nietzsche recognized that much of what we call personality is actually a coded language, a way of expressing what words cannot carry. Someone who disappears every time they begin to grow close to another person is not careless. They are reenacting an old story of closeness that once led to pain. Another who overworks constantly may not be driven purely by ambition. They may be running from stillness, because silence would force them to face what they have long avoided. The one who smiles too often or changes the subject whenever things grow serious may be hiding a burden too heavy to show openly. These behaviors are not random. They are survival strategies. A person who interrupts every conversation might appear arrogant, but beneath that urgency may be the fear of being silenced or ignored. Someone who always agrees with others, who says yes even when they want to say no, might seem generous, but inside they carry the old belief that love must be earned by pleasing everyone. When you see only the surface, you misinterpret. When you read the behavior as a form of confession, you start to perceive the deeper truth. The body does not know how to lie. Words can conceal, but gestures reveal. A nervous laugh, a glance that shifts away, a posture that collapses under pressure. These are the signals of hidden discomfort. A person may claim to be fine, but their body whispers otherwise. Nietzsche urged us not to dismiss these signs as quirks, but to view them as leaks of truth, fragments of the hidden self breaking through the mask. This awareness is not meant to turn you into a judge. It is not an invitation to accuse others or expose them. Nietzsche asked for compassion. Once you realize that behaviors are defenses, not attacks, You stop reacting to the mask and begin to listen to what is being protected beneath it. The question shifts from "why are you like this?" to "what pain is this shielding?" That shift transforms relationships. Instead of demanding explanations, you begin to offer understanding. Think of the person who constantly jokes about their suffering. Their humor is not lightheartedness. It is armor. Or the individual who avoids conflict at all costs. They are not always peaceful. They may simply be terrified of emotional chaos. Even the person who appears entirely put together, the one admired for strength and composure, may be running from an inner self they cannot accept. Once you recognize these defenses for what they are, compassion becomes inevitable. Nietzsche insisted that most lies are not told to deceive others, but to protect oneself. The human body, however, betrays the truth. It hesitates, it stiffens, it withdraws when threatened. If you observe carefully, you will begin to see the cracks where the truth shines through. These cracks are not weaknesses. They are reminders that beneath the mask, there is always a vulnerable human story. Imagine a world where instead of reacting to appearances, we paid attention to the signals beneath them. Where instead of demanding justification, we asked what someone's defenses were protecting. That kind of perception does not strip people of dignity. It grants them the space to be seen without judgment. Every silence, every exaggeration, every retreat is not just an obstacle to connection. It is also a message asking to be understood. The same invitation applies inward. Where do you cover your truth with performance? Where do you laugh at your pain, hide your anger, or work until you collapse, just to avoid stillness? If you can begin to observe yourself with the same clarity, then awareness becomes transformation. Slowly, the defenses you once thought defined you begin to loosen. And in that loosening, something honest emerges, something that no longer needs the mask. Behind every mask is not just a person but a story. A history of wounds, of fears, of long-forgotten needs that still echo in the present. Nietzsche understood that behavior is never without origin. The patterns recall personality are traces of battles fought long ago. What appears as arrogance, detachment, or control is often an echo of something far softer: fear of being left behind, shame that was never spoken, or longing that was never fulfilled. To truly see others is not to gain power over them, but to free yourself from the illusions created by their performance. Consider how many conflicts would dissolve if we looked beyond appearances. Instead of asking why someone is stubborn, you might ask what memory that stubbornness is protecting. Instead of assuming coldness is cruelty, you might see it as self-preservation. The world becomes less about accusations and more about curiosity. This shift does not make life easier, but it makes connection possible. Nietzsche's lesson was never to strip people bare, but to cultivate compassion rooted in clarity. What we often call faults may actually be signals. The silence that frustrates you, the exaggeration that irritates you, the retreat that confuses you, each is a signpost pointing toward a hidden place in the soul. When you choose to interpret them not as obstacles, but as clues, you open the door to genuine understanding. It does not mean excusing harmful behavior, but it does mean seeing the human beneath the mask, and in doing so, allowing yourself to connect on a level deeper than words. This awareness also demands self-reflection. Where in your own life are you still performing? Do you present certainty when you are uncertain? Do you display confidence when you are afraid? Do you avoid vulnerability by hiding behind humor, work, or silence? Nietzsche asked us not only to observe others, but to awaken to our own disguises. To see yourself clearly is to stop being enslaved by the roles written for you long before you had a choice. Transformation begins in small steps. Keep a private journal of the moments when you reacted too quickly, when you avoided openness, when you judged another without looking deeper. These small reflections become teachers. They turn unconscious habits into conscious choices. Slowly, What once felt automatic becomes something you can change. Honesty is not dramatic. It is steady, quiet, and persistent. Each time you notice a mask, whether in yourself or in another, you take a step closer to living without illusion. The question at the heart of Nietzsche's vision is simple. Can you bear to look beyond the mask? Can you face the uncomfortable truth that what you admire, resent, or fear in others is often a mirror of your own hidden struggles? To awaken to this reality is not to despair, but to grow. Because only when you see the mask clearly can you choose to live differently, to create connections that are authentic rather than rehearsed. Imagine what your relationships could become if you stopped demanding explanations and instead listened to the silent signals. Imagine what your life could feel like if you stopped performing and allowed yourself to be fully seen, fragile, yet real. The peace you seek cannot be found in perfection or applause. It begins with acceptance, the willingness to be human without shame. This is the gift Nietzsche leaves us. Not suspicion, not paranoia, but clarity. The world is full of masks, and so are we. But every mask carries cracks, and every crack lets the truth shine through. If you have the courage to look, you will see it. And once you see it, the way you listen, connect, and love will never be the same again.